I'm Gaz, and this is Let's Quickly Play Dwarf Quest. Let's start a new game here. Every year the dwarves of Rockholm celebrate the coming of the winter solstice. 5 champions are chosen to compete in what is known as the Dwarf Quest. These 5 men are to descend into the darkness of the Foundry, an ancient structure built deep underground. The first to escape will be recorded into the annals of Rockholm. As the last of this year's contestants, you, Moore and Firebeard, are already behind. Better hurry! So, this game, I believe, was originally an iPhone game, or an iPad game, and it reminds me a lot of old games like Cadaver and Equinox for the Super Nintendo, only it's very simplified because it was an app, and the music in this game is actually very loud and there is no volume control, so I'm actually doing post-commentary on this Let's Play. The combat system takes a little getting used to, or at least it took me a little while, but I'm going to clear out the dungeon here first. But the game is very light on puzzles, and I guess what is in the game can't really be considered a puzzle, you just have to do things in order. But it is kind of disappointing because the game is just a direct port of the mobile game. And so it is very short and doesn't have a lot of content. You would think that if the developers had really wanted to push this onto the PC, they might have added a little bit more to it. Apparently they are planning a sequel which will have sort of a random generation, so they're kind of doing the old developers trick of having the computer generate the content so they don't have to. This first level of the dungeon, well, first area of the dungeon isn't terribly difficult. It's got an interesting system with the cards that you pick up there, in that they can give you bonuses to your attack and defense, and you kind of have to think a little bit strategically, well, tactically, really, of when to use them. Fortunately, there are enough spread throughout the game that it's not terribly difficult to manage all that. And if you die, you just go back to the room that you entered from. So it's very forgiving. Poor Grar has nothing left of value, which is unfortunate, but we pick up plenty along the way. And I don't have enough money here to get a card, which is too bad because they are really useful at the end of this dungeon. But the enemies in combat, since combat is turn-based, it's really important to keep track of the number of actions that the enemy has, because they have less than the dwarf does. So a lot of times, and especially like in this room here, with multiple enemies, it is actually better to just sort of bring them towards yourself. But I don't want to take any chances, so I use the stone skin, which gives me a +1 to my armor, which actually, against these little rat guys, makes me invulnerable. Now I've got enough money to get a card, though. So, backtracking all the way to the altar to get something useful, which, really, I think the stone skin and then the war cry are probably the most valuable. Having the +1 to your attack throughout the battle has limited use, really. However, +1 defense throughout the thing. Now here, I don't really get the hang of this here. I use Warcry, which helps a lot to bring down the defense of that rat, but really it would be better to take its defense down and then use it. But you do a little bit of damage even if the enemies have a shield. So by the time you get to knock off those defense shields, they might be almost dead anyway. And now I've got a shield, which will give me a permanent bonus to my armor. Once again, I've got to backtrack. And this is where sort of the puzzles begin. I mean, the puzzles are mostly... Oh, these guys are bastards. I figure it out eventually, but the proper way to deal with the ranged units is to just slowly inch forward and sort of stand in defense so that they waste their attacks, and you just slowly get into them. However, when you've got multiple enemies like this, where one is coming at you for melee and the other is staying at range, it gets a little bit tricky. I usually just opt for attacking straight up and using a lot of the heal potions. There are a lot of them throughout the game. You don't really have to manage them too much if you use them wisely. Like, there's a potion right there, and another full heal. So, and another potion, so the game is really forgiving in that regard, and I would kind of expect that in future developments they might add a difficulty setting. But right now I'm not too bothered about these rats. I've got plenty of defense. They really don't take that much effort to take down. It's just that you've got to get close, and that uses your action points. So again, you have to sort of think how to most efficiently use your actions if you want to escape without any damage. But like I said, it's not really necessary to do that because there's just so much health in the game. Just checking the map, and I gotta backtrack all the way across the screen. But I can just pick up another stone skin here. Definitely the most valuable card to purchase. At least in this area. Later in the game, it helps a lot to have defense, but it's really more important to do damage and get rid of the enemies in the room. Because the longer you stick around, the more attrition happens. So this is where I think I decide that the wait and ambush game is the best tactical choice. You can outrun the rats and just sort of kite them around. So I'm doing pretty well here, but again, I want the rats to come forward and waste their turns on me. And since I had the stone skin up, it was really kind of foolish to just sit there and use the defensive tactics, because when you have that stone skin, that +1 armor is enough with the shield to ensure that you don't take damage from them. So really I could have just gone in here, axe swinging, but I was still sort of figuring this out, expecting, well, I didn't really know what to expect actually. Now this guy is a little bit tougher, you can tell he's a different color. And I was kind of surprised here that I actually took some damage. So this is where I employ the defensive tactic. But having the extra action point above your enemies really helps out. Only takes 2 hits on those guys, so it's not really worth sitting and waiting for him to come forward. But there are a lot of empty rooms here, and it's an okay dungeon crawler in that regard. Now, I walked in here and just went, oh shit. That archer, though, is really a pain. And I didn't have my stone skin here, which kind of threw me off. Didn't really know what to go for. I needed more damage, I needed to take out those rats, and I went for probably the least effective card you can get. Because really, it takes them out in 2 hits with a shield, but my normal attacks would have pretty much had the same effect. Just down a potion. And this is when I discover the best way to deal with the archers. Just inch forward and let your shields take all the damage. One thing that I kind of have a complaint about is that the enemy can attack diagonally into an adjacent square, but you cannot. So you actually have to move and waste another action point to get into position, which seems a little unfair. There's not much left to this floor, although it was much bigger, and there's another one, another dwarf. Another dead comrade. And this is where I'm going to end this episode, so I will see you in the next one.